My name is Bella Moore, I'm 31, and I've always been careful about who I let into my life. Independent, practical, not easily impressed, that's me. Yet when I matched with Ethan on one of those dating apps, something about his profile sparked curiosity. Not love at first sight, not even a flicker of infatuation, but an itch of curiosity that made me agree to dinner. The date was set at a luxurious downtown steakhouse. I'd been wanting to try it for months, a place where the tables gleamed under warm pendant lights, the scent of seared meat mingling with delicate oak-aged wine. I arrived a few minutes early, smoothing my hair nervously in the reflection of the glass doors. My phone buzzed with his last text. "See you soon. Don't be late." He was already there when I walked in, leaning slightly back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. The casual tilt of his head, the faint curve of his lips, he looked effortless, self-assured. I had to remind myself not to read too much into it. I slid into the seat across from him. "Oh, hey, you're here," he said, not looking up fully, his attention flicking back to his screen. It wasn't the warm greeting I'd imagined, but maybe he was nervous, or maybe he was just like this. The server arrived quickly, and I felt the first real flutter of excitement, the thrill of indulgence. Without hesitation, I ordered the dry-aged ribeye, a rich appetizer of charcuterie, and a glass of the house's finest red wine. I didn't glance at the prices. I wanted to savor the evening, not count pennies. Ethan, on the other hand, ordered a burger and a beer. $18 for the burger, a modest choice for a place like this. My eyebrows rose slightly at the contrast, but I forced a polite smile. "That's all?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Not hungry," he said, almost dismissively, eyes briefly meeting mine, then back to the phone. It was odd. The restaurant itself was beautiful, a cathedral of indulgence and polished service. Yet here was this man, unfazed by cost, detached in demeanor. My internal monologue pinged like a warning bell. Why does he seem so calm, so indifferent? I sipped my wine, trying to ignore the gnawing sense that something was off. He made small talk, soft, calculated, but his words barely bridged the growing chasm between us. I could feel him observing me, noting my excitement over the menu, my indulgent choices, the way I swirled the wine in my glass. As our conversation meandered, I noticed him glancing at his phone more frequently. Texts? Calls? Or was he simply bored? Part of me wanted to ask. Another part of me kept quiet, a faint unease crawling up my spine. Then came the first subtle foreshadowing. Ethan smiled, almost imperceptibly, as he commented, "You really go all out, huh?" It wasn't judgment, it was amusement. Something in the casual way he said it made me tighten my grip on my wine glass. I'm probably overthinking it, I told myself. Maybe he's just quirky. But beneath the shimmer of candlelight and clatter of cutlery, a quiet tension had begun to coil around me, like a rope slowly tightening. This was the calm before the storm, the moment before the first strike landed. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of this evening, everything about this carefully curated dinner, the expensive steaks, the indulgent wine, the polished silverware, would be twisted into a lesson I would never forget. And the first hint of that twist came in a single, casual sentence, one that would make my stomach sink and force me to confront not just him, but the value I placed on my own time, money, and dignity. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. Tonight, all I could do was sip my wine, feel the tension, and watch him, detached, observant, unknowingly preparing the first move in a psychological game I hadn't agreed to play. The conversation meandered lazily around work, hobbies, and mundane small talk, but something about Ethan's tone kept pulling at the edges of my focus. He laughed in the right places, nodded when I spoke, but it all felt superficial, almost performative. I tried to ignore the gnawing unease as I reached for my wine glass, letting the deep red swirl before I sipped slowly. Then, without preamble, without any hesitation, he looked up from his phone and said casually, "Just so you know, I'm really only here for the free meal." The words struck me like a punch. I froze, wine halfway to my lips, and for a moment, all sound in the restaurant seemed to vanish. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Was this a joke? Some awkward attempt at honesty? "No," I whispered, more to myself than him. He shrugged, a faint smirk playing at his lips, as if he were commenting on the weather. "No offense, but you're not really my type. The food here is incredible, though, so thanks for this." I blinked. Did he just say that? I stared at him, feeling my face heat up. Shock quickly morphed into a cocktail of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. I had dressed carefully for this evening, mentally prepared for nerves and small talk, but not for blatant, unapologetic audacity. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Stay composed. Don't give him the satisfaction. Thanks for the honesty, I said, my voice calm but steady. I pushed my chair back and excused myself. Need to use the restroom. I didn't wait for a response. The very act of standing up, of walking away, felt like reclaiming some shred of control in a situation that had already made me feel exposed. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as I made my way to the front of the restaurant. The server's eyes widened when I quietly explained the situation. I'll just pay for my portion, the burger and beer he ordered. The rest, he can handle himself. The server hesitated, glancing toward Ethan, who was still casually scrolling his phone, unaware or uncaring of the unfolding scene. With a nod, the server rang me up. I paid in cash, leaving a tip, and walked straight out the door. As I slid into my car, my phone buzzed incessantly. Where are you? Hello? Did you seriously just leave? Get back here right now. I ignored them all. My thumb hovered over the screen, then I typed a single message, crisp and final. You said you were only here for a free meal. I decided not to provide one. Enjoy your dinner. I hit send, and for the first time that evening, a weight lifted from my chest. The adrenaline in my veins settled into a fierce clarity. I had been bold and perhaps a little ruthless, but I had acted according to my own principles. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about the audacity it took to say something so cruel, so casually. But more than that, I couldn't shake the nagging thought, this isn't just an isolated quirk. There's a pattern here. And yet, for all the shock, there was a sliver of satisfaction in knowing I had responded with calm, calculated dignity. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't thrown a fit. I hadn't humiliated myself. I had simply chosen not to finance someone else's entitlement. The red velvet curtains of the restaurant faded in my rearview mirror, the scent of steak lingering faintly in my clothes. In the quiet of my car, I allowed myself a small, private smirk. The lesson had begun, and I was determined to see it through. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The storm wasn't over, it was merely gathering. The moment I closed the car door behind me, my phone erupted in a storm of notifications. Messages poured in one after another, each more frantic and audacious than the last. Where did you go? You can't just leave me like that. Are you serious? You're impossible. I stared at the screen, heart thundering, a mix of disbelief and irritation coursing through me. Part of me wanted to laugh. This was absurd. Another part burned with anger. How could someone have such audacity, such entitlement? I took a deep breath and scrolled through the messages carefully, documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, his words, unfiltered and unedited. If this escalated further, I would need proof. I had learned enough in life not to rely solely on memory when it came to people's behavior, especially people like him. It didn't take long for the pattern to emerge. Even in the chaos of texts, his strategy was clear. He matched with women, suggested extravagant dinners, and then expected them to fund his indulgence. The audacity, the calm execution, the casual detachment, it wasn't a one-off mistake. It was deliberate. My fingers hovered over my phone, drafting a concise response. You said you were only here for the free meal. I acted accordingly. Enjoy your evening. I sent it and silenced the phone. That simple act felt like reclaiming power, a small victory amid the ridiculousness of it all. But as I sat back in my chair, swirling the wine I'd bought earlier from a nearby shop, I couldn't shake the nagging anxiety. He hadn't just tried to scam me for a meal. He had the audacity to believe he could manipulate me, to think his casual cruelty would intimidate me into compliance. Over the next few hours, the text continued, escalating from frustration to panic, then to increasingly desperate pleas. It was almost comical, yet deeply unsettling. I found myself mentally mapping his pattern. First, charm, then detachment, then, finally, manipulation and pressure. He thrived on social leverage, on creating discomfort, on banking on politeness to cover audacity. I realized, too, that I wasn't the first. The more I dug, the more I understood. There were traces of his previous exploits scattered across social media, whispered warnings in mutual circles, casual posts by women describing similar experiences. He had a method, and it had worked, until tonight. For hours, I sat meticulously organizing screenshots, arranging evidence like a detective preparing a case. The texts, the timestamps, the casual declaration of entitlement, it all painted a picture of someone who treated social norms as obstacles, not boundaries. By the time I finally put the phone down, my pulse had slowed, but my mind remained sharp, focused. This wasn't just about a dinner. It was about principles, boundaries, and self-respect. And while I hadn't humiliated myself tonight, I also hadn't underestimated the potential fallout. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, thinking, he's audacious but predictable, arrogant but sloppy, and I'm not someone he can intimidate. Not tonight, not ever. The first lesson of this evening was clear. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are. They don't dress up cruelty or entitlement. They reveal it casually, as if it's a compliment to themselves. And when they do, you have two choices: comply or stand firm. I had chosen the latter. And standing firm wasn't just about leaving the restaurant. It was about preparing for what would inevitably come next. Because audacity like his doesn't fade quietly, it escalates. The storm was only beginning. The next week unfolded like a psychological minefield. At first it was small, texts from unknown numbers, vaguely familiar tones, messages that seemed to slip past the filters I'd set up. Then came the public encounters. Ethan appeared where I worked, at my favorite coffee shop, even in the grocery store aisle I always avoided. Each time, my stomach clenched with a mixture of fear and irritation, my instincts screaming that none of it was coincidence. He approached with a calculated casualness, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Bella, we really need to talk about what happened at dinner," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "You embarrassed me. You owe me an apology. And honestly, you should pay me back for the meal." I held my coffee tighter, deliberately walking past him without a word. Ignore him. Don't engage. That's all the control he gets. But the harassment didn't stop there. Texts started arriving from new numbers that clearly weren't his own. I quickly realized he was using apps to contact me, probably masking his identity and even trying to manipulate my social circles. Messages from friends of his, from fake profiles, each carefully crafted to make me question myself. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a message from someone claiming to be his best friend. She wrote, "Bella, what you did was disgusting. You left him there. He's traumatized. You should make this right." I stared at the screen, feeling a brief flare of frustration. But then, like a switch flipping, clarity returned. He's not just audacious. He's systematic. And I'm not going to be his next victim or his next weapon. I began methodically documenting everything: screenshots, timestamps, numbers, even photographs of encounters when he tried to corner me in public. Each piece was a thread I could pull if needed, a way to protect myself from the escalating chaos. The tension was almost cinematic, the quiet dread of walking into the coffee shop, the sudden realization that someone might be watching, the adrenaline that spiked whenever my phone buzzed. I was hyper-aware of every shadow, every casual glance. Ethan's game had turned into a psychological chess match, and I wasn't about to lose. Then came the most audacious attempt. He created a fake dating profile, stealing photos from strangers, and matched with me again. The messages seemed normal at first. The language, the timing, they all mirrored his real persona, almost perfectly. He wanted to lure me back into the same trap, the same steakhouse, the same scenario, perhaps thinking I'd let my guard down. I played along, not because I wanted to interact, but because I wanted to see how far he would go. He sent texts. "Running late. Order whatever you want. I'll be there soon." I didn't respond. I watched, waited, and let the trap reveal itself. After 30 minutes, he realized I wasn't coming. The audacity, the obsession, the meticulous planning, it was all there in black and white. The adrenaline ebbed slightly, replaced by a sharp sense of empowerment. He's predictable, he's obsessive, and I have control. By the end of the week, I had organized a digital dossier. All messages, encounters, screenshots, and timestamps. Every attempt at manipulation, every veiled threat, every orchestrated, coincidental encounter, it was all documented. I had a map of his obsession, a record of the harassment, and a clear understanding of his methods. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about the dinner anymore. It was about boundaries, self-respect, and refusing to be anyone's pawn. Ethan could escalate as much as he wanted, but I was ready. The storm had grown into a hurricane, but for the first time, I felt like I could navigate it. And in that calm, internal clarity, I allowed myself a small, private smirk. Let's see what you try next. By the time the second week passed, it was clear Ethan's games had reached their limits. His attempts to manipulate, ambush, and intimidate me had become increasingly transparent and increasingly reckless. The fake profiles, the constant texts, the public chance encounters, they all formed a trail I could follow, document, and, if necessary, expose. I carefully compiled the evidence into a single comprehensive file, screenshots of every message, every number used, every orchestrated encounter. Each timestamp told a story, each photograph corroborated the pattern. The audacity of it all was almost impressive, if it weren't so infuriating. The tipping point came one morning when I received a message from a number claiming to be his best friend, pleading with me to make amends. I paused, reading the text, feeling the full weight of his escalating obsession. But instead of panic or doubt, I felt a flicker of clarity. This is not my responsibility. I owe nothing to someone who declared his intent to exploit me. Within days, consequences began to unfold. Social circles began murmuring, mutual acquaintances quietly confirming what I already knew. His reputation, built on manipulation, entitlement, and deceit, started to crack. People began sharing their own experiences, and the story of the steakhouse scam spread organically without my intervention. Even when he tried to spin the narrative, portraying himself as the victim, I was prepared. The dossier I had created spoke for itself, leaving no room for distortion. His actions were laid bare, calculated, manipulative, and consistent. The harassment finally slowed after a subtle but decisive step. I threatened a restraining order. The constant texts stopped. The orchestrated encounters ceased. The public manipulations dwindled to nothing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a profound sense of relief. In the aftermath, I reflected on the lessons the experience had forced me to learn. First, trust your instincts. Red flags are never arbitrary. Second, boundaries are not optional. They are essential. And finally, sometimes the greatest empowerment comes not from confrontation, but from strategic, calm action. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I allowed myself a private smile. Ethan's audacity had been matched by my resolve. I had not allowed myself to be intimidated, manipulated, or exploited, and in that victory, I felt a quiet pride. As I looked forward, I realized that dating and life would always carry risks, but I also knew this. When someone shows you exactly who they are, you don't have to play along. You can stand firm, act decisively, and preserve your dignity. And for me, that lesson was invaluable. Ethan had wanted a free meal. What he got instead was a masterclass in boundaries, self-respect, and consequences. I leaned back, sipping my tea, feeling the storm finally settle. The universe had delivered its lesson, not to him, not to the world, but to me. And I was stronger for it.